Hello, everybody. Welcome to Reddit Roast Best of. I'm traveling right now, as you can tell by my farmer outfit. I'm in the UK, so we're not going to do a live roast, but we are going to compile the best of the roasts from our last 50, the rest profiles from our last 50 roasts. That's like 200 plus profiles that we've
Mhm.
analyzed over the last few months. So we're going to take the best five and give them back to you today. Mal, who have we got?
So for our best five roasts, we've got the optional essay Final Boss. We've got a Namibian commercial fishing managing director who exports sashimi-grade tuna to Costco
Not
and
a
Trader
not a
Joe's.
classic overrepresented profile there.
No, not at all. We've also got a wine exporting Ironman who started exporting local vintages to Hong Kong. We've got a chief of staff who bowls in his free time. And we've got an exotic reptile breeder who does that as a side business
With a bad GPA, I believe, if I remember rightly for
with
that.
a bad GPA.
So
Yeah.
these are all profiles that are interesting in one way or another, whether it's work or an interesting extracurricular or whatever, but they've all got some sort of problem that they're looking to overcome, whether it's the optional essay boss who's had all sorts of personal issues that we need to write about in the optional essays, whether it's GPAs, etc. So in these five roasts, we will go into those in detail. Let's get stuck in.
I really like profile one. I think it's a very unusual family business. Not seen this before. Um, do I have a real shot at Meditate with my MBA profile and school list? So they are 30, they're from Namibia. They've
Mhm.
originally studied biomedical sciences, finished with 3.7 GPA. They worked in health management before going to med school in the UK, but didn't complete med school, dropped out after the first year. Um, since then, like they said, life's taken a pretty wild turn. Uh, Took over the family business, which is a commercial fishing company. Looks like they've got major distribution deals going for them. They've been exporting to Costco, to Trader Joe's. Some really interesting work there. No extracurriculars that they've mentioned. Right now, I can't see any post MBA goals. Why an MBA? So, what they want to do is they need the structure, network, and tools to continue the family business. They want to get into international business, logistics, and in the food and export space, and they want to grow this business, and that's why they need an MBA. Family location factor, they also want to move with their family. They've got a wife and son. So yeah, they want to settle down for 3 to 4 years after the MBA in the city where they're at. So that's also a priority. Schools
Mhm.
targeted Rice Jones, Vanderbilt, Olin, Terry, UT Knoxville, Chattanooga, Arizona State, and UNC Charlotte. So among the T25 and below schools. Um, and yes, what do you think about this profile? Remember they saying they're open to ridicule, to judgment, to critique, whatever you have coming for them.
All right, well, let's ridicule them then. No, joking. I think it's quite a solid profile. Okay, starting from the academics then. So 3.7 GPA. I understand that that's been converted because obviously it's a UK. Oh no, it's med school in the UK. So this is biomed sciences. So I'm not completely clear if that's a US GPA or here. No, it says it in the bottom. My transcripts were evaluated by US Credential Service. So it's not actually a 3.7 in the US system, but
Mhm.
it's a 3.7 equivalent, which is a solid GPA. Although, as it's not a GPA, it's not actually a US GPA grade, it won't be directly taken on by the schools, and therefore it doesn't carry quite as much weight. But it's still obviously a strong score. Now, no GMAT, GRE, that's going to be an issue. Difficult to judge the academics without that. But 3.7 is 3.7. It's solid. Okay, and then in terms of professionals, now I really like this family business narrative, Mal. I think this is
Yeah.
really, really nice. I think you see a lot. I mean, we see a lot of family business applicants, but they're more often things like real estate, maybe an engineering company. Having a commercial fishing business is really unique. That's something that they're not going to see very often, and that is definitely acting in OP's favor. Extracurriculars, again, not specified. I hope that because there's a family that extracurriculars haven't taken a back seat, sometimes happens. OP, if you're really seriously considering, top schools, that's possibly a gap in the profile that you need to think about. Maybe it's just you haven't mentioned it here, but focusing and showing some sort of community contribution, whether that might be through the family business, that would be a strengthener for your profile. Namibia, definitely underrepresented. That helps. And in terms of goals, look, I really like these goals, right? Anything that is sort of develop and build the family business, really focused in, locked in on international business, logistics, entrepreneurship, food and export space. Those are areas that are really well catered by MBA programs that are not especially represented in the demand side from applicants. In other words, you get a lot of investment bankers, you don't get many fishermen applying. So this is a really strong industry to be focusing on, included in your goals. And yeah, I really, really like it from a profile perspective.
OP has a few more specific questions. We can get into those. First is about scholarships. So does this story actually give him a decent chance at merit scholarships as an international student?
Look, if you're going to target merit scholarships, it's very difficult to do that without a GMAT score. Yeah. So that's the key thing. I mean, yes, like potentially a merit scholarship could be on the cards, particularly from those lower ranked schools in the list, but it's going to be very difficult to argue that you deserve one without a GMAT score, right? Think about what schools mean by a merit scholarship is here, we're going to give you some money to bring you into the school to bring our GMAT average up. And if you haven't got a GMAT score, how are you going to bring the GMAT average up? So we'll talk about this more at length, but I think the GMAT is going to be key if scholarships are really what OP wants.
What about the GMAT center being, that's, I think, the main impediment, it's 1,000 miles away.
Look, every year we work with clients who have to get on a plane to take the GMAT. I worked with a client last year from Mauritania. I'm pretty sure he had to fly more than 1,000 kilometers for his test. Now, obviously, be strategic. If there's a GRE, if you can take the GRE more easily than the GMAT, then take the GRE. If there's an online option that you can do, then take the online option, right? You've got to be strategic about this, but not having a score because it's far away, honestly, is not really going to cut it. You're going to have a lot of other people from very remote places who are applying. And if they can do it, you can do it. And if a scholarship's important to you, don't rely on the waiver. So I see that was his comment, right? He's saying it's geographically challenging, so I'm seeking a waiver. Not if you want merit scholarship, you're not. It's going to be an issue there.
What about the schools that they've picked? Okay, so are any of them better when it comes to, for entrepreneurial type of candidates? Is it a realistic mix of reach versus safety?
Yeah, I think I've got a strong opinion on the second part. I think this is just generally quite a safe, probably too safe list of schools. I think OP, there's not going to be many Namibian applicants. And if OP can come up with a GRE or GMAT score that is not in the sort of north of 320 ballpark, so it doesn't even need to be that strong. But if OP can come up with a decent score, then I think there's no reason why OP can't target T15, M7 schools. You might find it's a bit more difficult to get scholarships out of them. And so the lower ranked schools are possibly going to be more forthcoming with scholarship money. But I would argue, if you're offered an admit from a Kellogg or whatever, you would think hard about options to maybe borrow the money, for example. No, I think that's a very conservative list of schools. And, frankly, the exposure and the sort of the non-traditional entrepreneurial types, look, all schools have those to a slightly lesser degree. And I think the proxy for this is to look at the schools that have more consultants in the program, right? We know, for example, that schools like Goizueta, Tuck, Yale have north of 40% consultants. So almost by definition, then, there are going to be fewer non-traditional entrepreneurial types. So I would say approach this by focusing away from the schools that are heavily consulting based and going down the other end. And I think that really the answer here is to push yourself, get yourself as high up the rankings as you can by getting a decent GMAT score.
Okay. I think we've covered all of OP's questions. And Yeah, not much ridicule, just lots of sound advice. Yeah.
No, not too much ridicule, I hope. OP,
Great
don't be disheartened.
profile. Yeah.
I sense a little bit of imposter syndrome in there. I really don't think that's the case. I think the professional background is incredibly unique, and so is Namibian. So I think schools are really going to like that. I had a fantastic time in Windhoek a few years ago, and if you're from Windhoek, in fact, even if you're not, just get in touch. I'd love to hear about your
Yep.
profile 2. This candidate. So we have, for context, our colleague Mal helps us to compile these profiles by scrolling through Reddit, and she assigns them a tag or a title, and can be sometimes a little bit sassy about it. And the title for this profile is optional essay final boss, and we'll start to see why that's the case. So too long. Didn't read. So summary: 725 GMAT. 2.7 undergrad GPA, poor Miami Latino first gen, good work experience targeting T15, goals, bulge bracket investment bank. Okay, so let's go into a little bit of detail here. So first GMAT, so 725 is the first GMAT attempt. Interesting. There's a bit of background about girlfriend being international, visas expiring. Anyway, so OP's applying now. So I would like to use the MBA to pivot into bulge bracket investment banking for renewables / infrastructure. Okay, that's not consulting, but it is quite a common goal. So let's see whether that's justified. In college, I was a D1 athlete, but was mugged and severely injured. Next season, I came back, broke my leg, got depressed, became an alcoholic, ended school with a 2.7 GPA and no job prospects. Worked as a business analyst for small technical projects. First for B of A, then on a contract for a few Japanese auto companies. Okay. Then got a job as a Japanese bank lending to energy development companies. End of 2023, started working at a private equity renewables developer doing structured finance. I'd like just jump in here and say, like, amazing rebound, OP. That's really impressive. So during 2023, got an offer for a smaller IB team in renewables. Was pursuing an MMA career, mixed martial arts, for those that don't know what that stands for, and didn't see the need to work in IB. Okay, given that I can always pivot back to boutique IB or go back to old project financing bank. So basically, quite a windy career narrative here. Now it's 2025. OP has another injury, tore every ligament in my knee. Girlfriend's mum just died. My dad just died. Now I'm worried about my financial future. In college, I didn't know what investment banking was, but I really want to go there now for the high pay, or at least he's being honest about it. Okay, not worried about working 90 hours a week as an investment banking analyst, and wants to do an MBA to pivot back into banking. Maybe wants a T15 MBA potentially, or maybe no MBA at all. Right, Jon, so much to unpack there. Good luck with your profile evaluation. Over to you.
So key takeaways that I like this guy. I feel for this guy. I think there's going to be a lot of rich stories to uncover from his journey of resilience. Okay, academically, look, we all know that Berkeley has some grade deflation, but man, that 2.7 is rough no matter how many ways you slice and dice it. And yes, there are valid reasons for why being a D1 athlete, going through those injuries will help some of this, but schools have a finite limit, lower limit to folks with sub 3 GPA. So keep that in mind when he applies to some of these schools. So that's, we all know how we feel how I feel about the academics. Professional.
725 offsetting that though. 725 is fairly solid.
It is fairly solid, Sam. But this would mean that schools would have to take in that 2.7 average into their GPA. It's just going to be. I think there's no doubt that schools will deep down know that OP can handle the course load and OP is a smart cookie. OP's analytical, et cetera. But that 2.7 is something that they have to take into consideration if and when they publish the whole GMAT, the whole GPA range, to US News and in their own website. So
which then affects their ranking. Importantly.
Correct. And yes, there are schools that are a little bit more lenient when it comes to the lower limits. HBS is one of them, actually. But that's still something to consider in some ways. But anyway, professional. Look, I love any journey of resilience. What OP has accomplished has been fantastic. When I read this, Sam, this LinkedIn headline popped into my head, which is how tearing my ligament training to be an MMA fighter helped me find my way structuring $1 million deals in private equity. That's just like chef's kiss.
I'd click on it. I'd hit like.
But jokes aside, I think I love the progression. I love the focus in the space. We can talk about how that parlays into a goal later on, which I don't really love. But professional pillar is strong. Demographic is also strong. First-gen Latino, D1 athlete, underrepresented. So no, that's going to help OP in his applications. Goal-wise, look, I think, having accomplished all of this and stating that you want to go into IB, it's a little bit like you're trying to pop a bottle of champagne and you do it quietly, so it sounds like an angel's fart. The IB goal is fine to leverage, but I would like to see something a little bit more in the renewable space. And as it stands now, not very differentiated. So, Stan, we can talk a little bit about what that goal could look like, but as it stands today, it's not very differentiated.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, so much to get our teeth into. Right. First, I want to explain my comment about the optional essay final boss. So anyone who has a glaring gap in their profile, anybody watching with a glaring gap, that could be a low GPA, that could be a random recommender, it could be all sorts. Schools give you an optional essay explicitly stating, like a catch-all essay saying, is there anything else we need to know? Tell us here. And things like, my GPA is lower than I could do because I bust my leg in college. I had to drop out of XYZ class. I have an employment gap on my resume because my dad died and I needed to leave where I was and move across the country to support my mom, for example. All of these like extraneous like circumstances that have affected your journey, those come up in the optional essay. And that's why OP, it's going to be really important that you explain, in particular that GPA, in your optional essay in depth and really explain. I mean, Jon, you can tell us what a good optional essay looks like, but basically show the rebound, right?
Yeah. I think, a good narrative can be, you start with, hey, I recognize that my 2.7 is not reflective of my ability to handle your academic course load. I like to explain the events and circumstances that have led to this 2.7. In lieu of this, I want to offer alternate evidence of my, academic ability, i.e. my 725. Additionally, having dealt with all these episodes in my life showcases resilience, which is an important quality among blah, 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 blah. I think everything sounds genuine, which it is genuine. And I think schools someone reading this optional essay will no doubt try and find a way to take his side. It's going to be a matter of, we love this guy, we love OP. How can we make this work with a 2.7? Let's find a way.
Yeah, nice. OP, if you get nothing out of today's call, make a note of what Jon just said and use that as your optional essay. He's absolutely on point. Okay. One thing that I really like about this profile is this poor Miami Latino first gen. It reminds me of a client I worked with in round 2 last year, who was a Miami Latino as well, who secured the biggest scholarship bundle we have ever seen at Sam Weeks Consulting. He had $850,000 of scholarships, a bunch of full rides from a bunch of top schools, like absolutely incredible. And that was largely because he applied via the consortium using the Miami Latino first gen angle. And basically, the consortium makes it really easy to apply to lots of schools. And we'll come to an extreme example of that later. But I would encourage you to really lean into that Miami Latino narrative. Explain how that has shaped you. A lot of schools offer an essay specifically for you to write about your background. And I think schools will appreciate that context. And that is also a big pro for your narrative, particularly when it comes to scholarships, as I've just mentioned. So we've talked about the optional essay. We've talked about the demographic component. Let's talk about goals, Jon.
Okay.
As a former investment banker myself, I see this and I'd like it to be more specific. I think OP does do a good job of focusing in on this particular area of investment banking that he's been working on in the past. Is there a mention of renewables here? Yes, there you go. MBA pivot to bulge bracket investment banking for renewables / infra. Okay. I think for investment banking to work as a narrative here, you've got to be really specific about which area within investment banking works, where you're targeting. If you just generic throw in that I want to go into investment banking, like it's just not going to stand out. But if you say, I want to go into the project finance department of BNP Paribas in New York, focused on infrastructure project finance. Okay, that's specific, that's memorable, and frankly makes a lot of sense. The reason I give BNP as the example is it's one of the investment banks best known for project finance. And if you can show that, and if you maybe expand on that and explain why BNP Paribas, they will see that you've done your research. They will see that you're not just aiming for bulge bracket investment banking because of the pay, even though that's what it is. They will see, okay, there's a good reason for you wanting to go into this space. So be hyper specific about your goals, about which team, which bank, which location, and then I think investment banking can work as a goal. Have I missed anything there, Jon?
No, I think that's a great goal, and I think that totally makes sense, Sam. I think to go even further, tailoring the school to tailoring the bank or the name of the institution to the school, and citing and reaching out to alumni from the programs who worked at those places.
Love that.
Would show that you are actively doing your homework and reminding the admissions committee that, hey, we've sent someone from our program to this. Obviously, if it's a big well-known bank, but for more niche roles, I think that's going to work even harder.
For example, I want to go to BNP Paribas project finance team doing in renewables and infrastructure in New York. I spoke to Joe Bloggs, graduate of Yale from 3 years ago, who is currently in that team, who explained that how he benefited from the MBA was structured finance training, leadership training, maybe there's some marketing component, etc. So then you can really show, as Jon says, remind them that they have put people into this goal in the past and recently, and also it leads on to why you need an MBA to reach that goal specifically, which is just dreamy when it comes to essay flow. Okay, really, really good. OP, look, I think the conclusion here, Jon, is we like the profile. I think that given the 2.7 GPA, I would want OP to broaden out the school list. I think if you just apply to T15, I think the chances are there's a lot of them that are just going to say, sorry, we can't deal with that GPA. But if OP broadens out to maybe T20, maybe T25, puts enough applications out there, give it with a bit of luck, one of them will bite.
Yep.
Good stuff.
I'm aligned.
Awesome. Next profile.
Am I cooked in Seattle?
Am I Gen Z? Yes, you are.
I intend to take the GMAT in 6 to 9 months, so no GMAT score yet. My profile is as follows: male, 28 years old, Australian, bachelor's and master's degree from a top 50 world university with a not so great GPA, 2.9 on conversion, but is a distinction in Australia. That's interesting. 4.5 years of experience, 5.5 at the time of the application. 1 year at Deloitte, will be 2 years at matriculation. Senior consultant in strategy and AI team in Australia. Many international projects I see there. Deloitte projects, yeah, lots of Fortune 500, Max 7 government, Navy, defense projects. 3.5 years at a Fortune 500 engineering firm as well. 2 years spent as part of a global future leaders development program. Worked across UK, Poland, Europe and Australia, I see there. 1.5 years in the strategy team in Australia, post the leadership program. And currently also maintaining an active LinkedIn alumni networking group with 400 members across 20 plus countries. Side hustle, exported Australian wine from local vineyards to Hong Kong and China. So this is an opportunity in 2022, travel to China 4 times in 2 years, a few extracurriculars there based in China, in the yacht club, jockey club, whale club. Wow, okay.
No, pitching to clients at those places. So
wow.
it's a sort of entrepreneurship hustle story, I think.
Yeah, but discontinued I see as well due to other commitments. Other extracurriculars, travel to 30 plus countries and compete in Ironman, which I think is a triathlon, right? The next
No, it's
Ironman.
long distance running, I think.
Right, okay. So that's also quite international. So lots there. What do you
Mm. Yeah, very international profile overall. Okay, let's break it down. So academically, look, this is interesting on the 2.9 GPA. Like, we need to get this
Yeah.
clear. Generally speaking, this is why we don't convert, and why the schools don't want you to convert your GPA, because the difference between 2.9, which is a train wreck in America, and distinction in Australia with a weighted average of 73%, which I think is a first in the UK system, if I'm not mistaken. Like, those are dramatically different numbers, dramatically different, like the difference between getting admitted and not. So this is generally why we advise and why schools ask, do not convert your GPA, because it could lead to real distortions. I'm going to assume then that this is a solid GPA. I might be wrong on that, but I'm going to assume that it's solid. I'm going to go with that 73% unconverted number. Okay, so keep going. So academically, solid. Next, demographic. Now, Australian, underrepresented generally. There's always a solid cohort of Australians, 2 or 3 kind of per class, but not many. So definitely puts you at an advantage. The extracurriculars are interesting. I particularly like the hustle, right? This idea of selling Australian wine to Chinese people, that is awesome. That's a kind of entrepreneurial story that could easily make up a good essay for INSEAD, for example. I like the Ironman as well. I think that shows grit. And I think there was something about a LinkedIn community as well. Did I see that?
Employment.
Yeah. This LinkedIn alumni group, like, that shows community building and is the kind of post MBA activity that the schools like, the kind of the person who manages the alumni and connects with the schools, etc. That's great. Now, professional. A year at Deloitte and doing a whole bunch of projects, and before that, Fortune 500 engineering firm. Now, this is strong in that very solid training, particularly the rotation program. Schools will really like that, but it does position OP right in the midst of the most typically difficult and competitive pool, which is the management consultants, the strategy consultants. If OP is going to be right up against the McKinseys, the Bains, the BCGs, all of the other big fours, a lot of whom are going to be sponsored for their MBAs, a lot of whom are going to have really strong undergrads and really strong GMATs. So the key word for OP, and kind of that captures everything here, is you got to be unique. Unique is the key word. You got to find ways, whatever it takes, to differentiate your profile. Just going on stats alone is not going to get you admitted. So OP has to really find a unique angle. So overall, a strong profile, strong potential profile, but will come down almost entirely to how unique OP can make their profile.
Okay. And OP does have a question. I am yet to begin GMAT preparation, and I intend to take it in 6 to 9 months from now. That's at the
Okay.
top.
Okay.
My question is whether a strong GMAT and broad work experience could compensate for that below average GPA.
This is interesting. So here he's saying that the GPA is below average, but he's also saying distinction with a 73 down here. So, okay, let's answer the question as it stands, which is assuming that that GPA is low, then yes, the GMAT is about the only thing that you can do to compensate for that. Certainly the most impactful thing that you can do to compensate for that. What level are we talking? Well, if this GPA is really a 2.9, that is substantially below the average of INSEAD, for example, and your GMAT or GRE would need to be substantially above the average, like a lot. GRE 330 plus, GMAT 695, 705 kind of level plus to compensate for a 2.9 GPA. But again, it's unclear to me whether that GPA is going to come through strongly or not. But I wouldn't say cooked, but I would say, yeah, time to knuckle down. That's the key. That GMAT is going to be the key distinguishing factor now, besides the uniqueness of the professional narrative.
Right. And I don't see a mention of OP's goals anywhere. What kind of goals do you think OP is, best positioned to write about?
Yeah, I mean, I know what OP is going to be thinking. The kind of knee-jerk reaction for most Big Four consultants is to say, "I want to transition into MBB," which could work. OP certainly has the consulting and strategy experience for that, but that is also what the sponsored McKinsey people are saying and the sponsored Bain people are saying, which is, I'm going to go back to my firm, and those people have a guaranteed return offer from McKinsey or Bain, and you're going to go against them. I'm not sure that's ideal. I would prefer to focus on a strategy role in an industry that OP likes. So just kind of off the top of my head, the examples that I had, it might be something that builds on this trading experience, on this Australia-China trading experience. Maybe join a company that is involved in both of those markets. That would make sense. And that way you can combine your professional experience with your hobbies, and that would make a nice, logical, really quite unique narrative. Another one might be Ironman related. Maybe there's a company, I have no idea, but maybe there's a company that organizes Ironmans and maybe they need a strategy director. OP would be absolutely perfect for that role. And again, that would be a unique and interesting post-MBA goal that differentiates OP. Another example, a bit more standard, might be something strategy related for a sports company like Nike, for example, Nike, as the Americans would say. So a goal that combines OP's interests with OP's professional experience would be really nice. Now, the last thing I'd like to mention on this is the international angle of OP's profile is really aligned with INSEAD. Now, OP is clearly focused on INSEAD, and I think rightly so. We have a lot of people asking about INSEAD purely for visa reasons. They don't want to go to America, so they're like, what's the next best school? And it's INSEAD. And they're not really naturally a good fit for that school. OP is a good fit for that school. What do I mean by that? What do INSEAD look for when they're trying to assess this international fit? One, do you speak a second language? It sounds like OP might speak Mandarin and English, China, Australia. If so, like really, really nice international language experience. That's one. Two, they look for professional experience in different countries. OP has got this global rotation program, which hits that nail on the head. Work experience in all of these different countries. That's fantastic for INSEAD. Also positive is the China venture, right? That is entrepreneurial experience in a new market. That is catnip to INSEAD. So in terms of fit, I think OP has a really, really good fit with INSEAD. And I would also add that the UK programs would love this international experience as well. Oxford, Cambridge, LBS should definitely be in the mix also. Australians also have quite a nice time with visa applications in the UK, etc. So for me, this is a 4-school application: INSEAD, Oxford, Cambridge, LBS.
Okay. And do you think OP has a chance in US M7 schools or T15s?
Yeah, possibly. Again, goes really up against the MBB clients, the MBB applicants for that pool, but relatively low work experience or like kind of on the average for US programs. So yeah, give US a shot as well. Maybe consider US and Europe UK applications kind of in parallel and see where everything falls. Obviously, the visa questions in the US are a bit unknown at the moment, so it's a good hedge to have both. And if OP is going to focus on the US, yeah, T10, M7, depending on where that GMAT shows up.
All right. Rolling the dice on round 2 this year, which means that OP's already applied. Demographics, 29 Black USA. GRE 330, well done. 3.59 GPA in Pol Science and Economics from Cornell. Work experience 6 years approx. Currently working as the Chief of Staff at a Series B fintech. Previously was the Chief of Staff at a Series B AI startup, was a PE associate, and had 2 years at MBB. Post MBA goals, biz ops at a neobank or a larger scale fintech. Long-term goal is fintech entrepreneurship. Target schools, Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, and Sloan. Recommenders, head of sales from my current startup. OP says CEO is very anti-B school, would not be supportive. CEO, founder of my prior startup, who is a GSB alum. EC's mentor to local underserved high schoolers, junior board member for small LGBT-oriented non-profit, various volunteer stunts for local electoral campaigns, and a recreational league bowling team captain.
How good!
A lot of lots of cool things there. What do you think?
Really impressive. Really impressive. Let's start academically. So, 3.59 undergrad GPA is bang on the average of 3.6 of the M7s from Cornell as well. Really, really nice. We have a 330 GRE, which is a little bit above the averages of these schools as well. So academically, very, very strong. Demographic wise, 29 years old, exactly the right age for an MBA, Black, USA, domestic candidate, very underrepresented, very URM, and the schools will love this profile. Professional, really good progress. Chief of staff roles, interesting companies, including the MBB Foundation after undergrad. So really strong professional experience as well that they're going to like. The extracurriculars, really strong again, mentoring underserved high schoolers. Unless that kind of, you play that into like the Black community angle, maybe that's impactful, but you see a lot of mentorship. What I really like is the junior board member of the LGBT orientated nonprofit. Not sure if OP is LGBT themselves. If they are, that will help on the demographics perspective. If not, very easy to position as an ally and quite a compelling story there for any leadership or community focused essays, backed up by this recreational league. Really interesting extracurriculars, really like shows some flair. In terms of goals, clear, logical, right? If OP is already in sort of fintech and payment services, moving into a neobank and doing fintech entrepreneurship makes perfect sense as a goal. Overall, one of the strongest profiles we've seen this year. I really, really like it.
So then, given that OP is already applied, what do you think his chances are at Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, and Sloan?
Well, we had results earlier this week, interview announcements from HBS earlier this week. So I think it looks like OP submitted this right before the interviews came out. And to be blunt, I think if OP didn't get an interview at HBS, he fumbled in his application somewhere. He really should have got one. If I'm right, OP, and you do have a HBS interview offer that's just come through, get in touch and we'll help you with HBS mock interviews. Zach and Nanako in our team have both fairly recent HBS grads that have been through the process themselves and are extremely strong interviewers. So we can really put you through your paces and prepare you. I think very strong profile. And if he hasn't got the interview, he messed something up and should really be looking to reapply next year.
Yeah, and I can see in the comments that OP is really feeling like the waiting part for the interviews is quite brutal for him.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that's resolved now, OP, and you have some admits. Please, update your profile if you do. We'd love to know.
Great stuff.
Or,
Next profile.
or next.
So we have a 28-year-old African-American. Goal is to apply in round 1, 2026. Also applying to other programs, etc. Recently, 28-year-old black male. Okay, GMAT. 720 on the old GMAT, which is respectable. I think we agree. Undergrad, bachelor's in environmental science, 2.8 GPA, John, from a smaller public university in New Jersey. Worked 2 jobs to pay for school while treating autoimmune disorder. Okay, graduate studies, master's in sustainability management with a much higher GPA of 3.8 from a well-known school. Again, full-time student while working full-time. Work experience, 4 years of work experience. Started off in environmental consulting, recruited to work for an engineering firm, now landed in environmental health and safety for manufacturing. Position title is specialist. Responsibilities are that of a manager. Environmental reporting, sustainability metrics, zero waste initiatives, health and safety, etc. Currently making 97K comp. Okay, extracurriculars. Active participant in my historically black fraternity with many various volunteering events to give back to the community. Also own a boutique exotic reptile breeding business, John. Hope you're not scared of snakes. I cannot think of anything worse than breeding snakes, but it's just me. Why MBA? Accelerated path to senior sustainability roles in ESH strategy, corporate responsibility and operations leadership. Schools, I've actually already been accepted, interesting, into a lesser known MBA program in New Jersey. However, I noticed that the value comes from recruiting from T15 programs. So basically targeting, sounds like T15, but is very aware of the low undergrad GPA. There's a connection to Columbia via some friends by the looks of it. Targeting maybe Yale, think about Yale, maybe think about Fuqua, NYU Stern. Okay. And no specific questions being asked, but really profile evaluation is what he wants here. John, why don't we start high level? How do you see this profile?
I like this profile overall. I'm not going to lie, that reptile business has intrigued me a little bit. But we'll go through that. Academically, look, everything in this profile is telling me to forgive that 2.8 GPA. Dealing with a valid illness, working 2 jobs to pay their way through college, and a 3.8 master's to make up for it. But a 2.8 is still a 2.8, Sam. And even if that optional essay works the hardest that it could ever do, no miracle can repent for a 2.8 GPA. And you'll note that many of the top schools have published their full ranges. And so that let that be a guide. So academics, I have concerns.
Offset maybe by 720 though, right?
Yeah. I think that 720 definitely helps, as well as that 3.8 masters. So academic is concerned. Professional, I love the environmental angle. I like that there is, OP has some leadership component to what they do. But when it comes to vocational type roles, it obviously will be critical to bring out more analytical and strategy type work, which I don't really see articulated. And we can talk about that later, Sam. And we can also talk a little bit about that reptile breeding business as well. Demographically, underrepresented for sure. Goals, I love the callback to the current work and staying in the sustainability sector. I think, it would behoove OP to look at a role that would benefit from an MBA program, making sure that, an MBA is what's needed, or at least could greatly benefit and lead to and drive success in that role. And, all things considered, that's a good school list. I think Yale will be a great fit for OP. But that GPA is going to be the biggest question, the biggest red mark in their profile.
Let's address that elephant in the room then, or the snake in the room. 2.8 GPA. I did a little bit of research before our session started, and to kind of give viewers some context about why John and I are so worried about this. As John mentioned, some programs publish the GPA range. Not many, actually. I was surprised. Back in the day, you used to see this quite a lot, but fewer now. But Booth, for example, so M7, right up there, Chicago Booth, do publish the GPA range. And as you can see, the lowest GPA of their entire class last year was a 2.36. Now, we're talking about a 2.8 for this profile, which is, captured sort of within that range. So what Jon and I are saying is it can be done, but you can guarantee that people at the bottom of this GPA range have got some exceptional stuff compensating for it. A strong GMAT, strong GPA, GRE, masters, as Jon said, can help, other qualifications, and just generally a strong profile aside from the GPA. So this gives you some ideas, some context. And I think the key thing here is that the average is a 3.6. So you can think if you've got at the top end, you've got a 4, and everybody above a 3.6, so 3.6 to 4 is offsetting everybody that is 3.2 to 3.6, then anything below 3.2 is very, very exceptional and very, very difficult. And so that's why we're so focused on this. So, Jon, with that in mind, let's talk a little bit about, well, just quickly, what that optional essay would look like. So OP has some very clear, excuses for want of a better word, why he got that GPA. Talk to us, tell us what an optional essay might look like to kind of mitigate that as much as can be done in an optional essay.
Yeah, great push, Sam. I think, look, starting any essay with addressing, Dear Admissions Committee, my 2.8 undergraduate GPA is not reflective of my ability to handle the rigors of an MBA program. I would like to provide, a context for why my GPA is below expectations. And then that's when OP would talk about their medical issues, as well as not having the time to be able to devote to academic studies. And then, after explaining what has driven that low GPA, offer up evidences of how, they're able to succeed in an MBA program, right? I would like to provide evidence of having succeeded in my master's with a 3.8 GPA and maybe point to specific classes within the master's where he got an A, preferably the ones that are quantitatively focused, and then also point to their 720 GMAT, right? And then if there are other ways to bring that out, whether it's analytical work at their work, at their job, well, that's everything's fair game there. And, if during the undergrad there was a trend line, whether it's senior year, they had a higher GPA and whether they had some relatively strong grades, that's also worthy to mention as well. So plenty to work with here, Sam, in terms of, in this optional essay.
Nice. So I think boiling that down, here's what happened, here's what I learned, and here's evidence that I'm doing better now.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. Okay, cool. Let's talk about this previous admit. The comment in here, schools. I've been accepted into a lesser known MBA program in New Jersey. My thoughts, Jon, as I see this, is it's kind of encouraging because OP is is getting admitted somewhere. So there's a bit of to me, that's saying, okay, good, you're onto something here. No mention of any scholarship there, though. That would have been even more encouraging. How do you think OP would want to be adapting this lesser known MBA application to an M7? Like, what is he going to take away from that he's going to use? Mm-hmm. What might need to change? Any thoughts?
I think you're looking at pretty much a similar process. I think the stakes are just much higher with an M7 program. And so devoting more time to the optional essay, making sure you have a stronger narrative, tightening up those goals. I think everything just dialed up a notch, Sam. I think that's how I would approach it. I think, OP has had experience applying to an MBA program. I think that confidence will help when it comes to everything from asking recommendations and the interview process. But yes, I would imagine everything has to be dialed up.
Yeah, my thoughts on this are you could have got away with dropping the ball in that last application in a couple of areas. Like maybe your goals didn't have to be watertight, or one of your recommendations isn't that good, and you've still got the admit. If you're going to get into M7, you need to seal those gaps, and you need to make sure your entire app is bulletproof. I think that's sort of my main takeaway. Okay, Jon, let's get on to this reptile breeding business. So I guess this is OP has put this in the extracurriculars section, and it makes it sound like this is something he's doing more for fun than for funding to make money. How could he use this to his advantage? What are some of the traits that this conveys? How is an adcom going to see this extracurricular?
This is an unconventional one, and I have some thoughts, but I also want to, preface this with a example LinkedIn headline. Would you like to hear it?
Yes, go for it.
How taming iguanas and lizards taught me about cross-functional management. But in all seriousness, I think there's an opportunity for OP to connect this somehow to their sustainability and environmental angle. I don't think this should be, I'm rearing them for their skins so I can make leather and sell them to, the highest bidder. I think that's going to be tough to for anyone to swallow. But I think there's an opportunity to make this interesting. I think there has to be, how does this help make the world a better place angle to this reptile breeding? I don't know what exactly this would look like, but OP has an opportunity here. What are your thoughts, Sam?
Yeah, it might not be for the skins, to be fair. It might be for pets. And there might be an argument that he's doing it in a more sustainable or eco-friendly or animal-friendly way than others. And there might even be a story there. Like, I discovered this world of immoral breeding of iguanas or whatever it may be, and I decided to do it in a more humane way. And I'm setting up this business, putting in place new processes, new standards to do that in a way that you can then feed into the whole environmental health and safety theme. I think that could be a positive in that way if handled well. Interesting. Okay. And so I guess the point here that I want to emphasize is that topics like this, which could be perceived by some people as immoral, or some people's values might go against some people's values. That doesn't mean you can't write about it. Just be sensitive to how some people are going to perceive these things, and make sure you kind of write about it in a mature way that comes across as conscious and aware of these sensitivities. Okay, good.
I think OP has the best of intentions when it comes to reptile breeding, so I'd be willing to give OP the benefit of the doubt. There is a spectrum, right? You have folks who work in maybe for cigarette companies. You have folks who work in alcohol, and if you work for like a Moet Hennessy, no one's telling you you're promoting alcoholism, right? It's a job's a job. And so I think I think it's all about perspective. It's all about context. And I think, especially with this environmental sustainability angle, I think OP can make something happen from this reptile business.
Yeah. Just building on that, one of the most successful, interesting, and liked characters of my MBA program works at one of the well-known tobacco firms. Did before the MBA and does now. There is a pragmatism in the business school world that these things are sort of understood, and not that necessarily there's a parallel between reptile breeding and cigarettes, but I think you get the point. Okay, excellent. So I think hopefully what we've done there is given a cautiously optimistic and constructive perspective of this profile. I'd like to highlight some of the consultants gassing up this guy in the comments. I was blown away by this. Never seen somebody, Jon, with a 2.8 GPA getting as much positive feedback as this guy's getting in the comments. So I think the takeaway or my final message on this is OP, you've got work to do. You've got work to do. You have got a chance at these schools, but don't underestimate just how much work is involved in doing that. So I think that's the end of our roast today. If you've enjoyed today's roast and maybe you'd like to get your profile roasted, feel free to send it as a DM to us on Reddit. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn as well. I'm very active on LinkedIn, Sam Weeks. You should be able to find me quite easily. Till next week,